Thank you. My name is Andy Vaughn. I'm ASOR's Executive Director, and it's my privilege every year to welcome all of you to this meeting where we start our annual meeting. Last year in Chicago, when I welcomed everyone, I observed that the world, and indeed ASOR, was as polarized as I have ever experienced it. That polarization remains, and yet I truly hope that our meeting will create safe places and spaces for conversations to increase understanding, because that's what we all do. It may be hard to conceive, but I would like to suggest that the mission and work of understanding cultures for millennia, ancient and modern, has never been more important than it is now. Like I did last year, I encourage us to listen to others, especially those with whom we do not agree. I also encourage us to work hard to create these safe places and spaces so that we can have conversations where we might learn. And to that end, it starts with us recognizing that we might not be right. And in that regard, I want to start by reading two poems for you tonight, sort of an unorthodox way for me to welcome you here. The first poem is by Walt Whitman, written in 1867, 2 years after the end of the Civil War. It may be hard for us to conceive in the United States, but it's a period that's even more polarized than we are today. O me, O life. O me, O life, of the questions recurring, of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish, of myself forever reproaching myself, for who more foolish than I, and who more faithless? Of eyes that vainly crave the light, of the objects mean, of the struggle ever renewed, of the poor results of all, of the plotting and sordid crowds I see around me, of the empty and useless years of rest, with the rest me intertwined. The question, O me, so sad recurring, what good among these, O me, O life? Answer, that you are here, that life exists and identity, that the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. As I think about contributing a verse, I try to remind myself that I might not be right and that I need to listen to others. That caused me to think of the second poem that I'd like to read, one that I studied more than 35 years ago in university by Yehuda Amichai. As I was attending a conference in Switzerland this past March, a woman who's a priest in the Church of England quoted this poem to illustrate how the church where she works today, that was bombed by Germans in World War II, was now a center for pluralistic understanding and outreach. From the place where we are right, by Yehuda Amichai. From the place where we are right, never will there sprout flowers in the spring. The place where we are right is trampled and hard like a courtyard. But doubts and acts of love make the world tilled and porous, like a mole, like a plow. So a whisper may be heard in the place where the house was once destroyed. I look forward to hearing all of your stories and listening to your stories this week, to learning from you, and to all of us working together to create safe places and spaces to facilitate our shared work. And now it's my privilege once again to introduce our president, Professor Sharon Herbert, who will kick off our annual meeting and introduce the plenary speaker for tonight. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Andy. I add to Andy's opening remarks my own warm welcome to you all. We are gathered here tonight and for the next several days to learn what is new and happening in our fields and exchange ideas across disciplines and cultures. ASOR's program committee has put together an exciting multidisciplinary program highlighting the endeavors and achievements of our members. We all here are engaged in the study of the past. We view it through different lenses: textual, archaeological, art historical, material sciences, and many more, using an expanding array of tools, old and new, becoming available to us. We meet here in Boston, a great city, replete with the histories of many peoples. Our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee has worked hard over the last year researching these histories and putting together a gazetteer of sites in the area that you can visit on our website and maybe in person. I urge you to take advantage of that. Since we will be meeting again in Boston next year, you will get 2 bites out of this apple, so plan ahead for extra time if you can. I turn now to tonight's main event, our plenary speaker. It is my great honor to introduce Professor Fikri Kulakoğlu of the University of Ankara, Turkey. Professor Kulakoğlu's current research interests include mainly the early Bronze Age and the second millennium Assyrian Trade Colony Period in Anatolia, along with Hittite Archaeology and Culture. He has produced over 80 publications on these. Since 2006 until today, and the future I hope, he has been the director of major excavations at Kültepe in central Turkey. The site exhibits a long cultural sequence from the late Chalcolithic, 4000 or so BC, until the late Roman period. Kültepe is primarily known in the archaeological and philological worlds for its cuneiform tablets from old Assyrian merchants' archives. These artifacts bring valuable insights into the social, political, and economic life of Central Anatolia and Upper Mesopotamia during the 19th and 18th centuries BCE. The recent excavations have uncovered a number of monumental structures and confirmed that an international trade network originated there in the early Bronze Age. Kültepe has produced an amazing array of finds. A personal note here: I define myself professionally as a field archaeologist. I am never happier than when I am digging in the dirt in search of the past. Today, we field archaeologists pride ourselves on our scientific, non-treasure hunting approach, and we mostly succeed. But there are few among us who cannot admit deep down that a major attraction to our profession is finding cool stuff. Okay? Maybe not cool to everyone. Counting and weighing 23,000 kilos of pottery from a site can feel a little tedious. Seriously though, the core of our job is wringing every bit of information we can out of what we find. Professor Kulakoğlu is an outstanding model of the scientific approach. He has indeed found lots of cool stuff at Kültepe, which we will be seeing tonight. He has also initiated a rigorous research strategy there based on multidisciplinary approach and cooperation, open to all disciplines willing to collaborate, either to contribute to the understanding of the site or to test their own modalities. That's very cool too. I now give you Professor Fikri Kulakoğlu speaking on the transition from early Bronze Age to Middle Bronze Age at Kültepe, architecture, figurines, and seals. Please join me in welcoming him.
Good evening. I feel very privileged to have been invited here for this talk. First of all, I would like to thank ASOR President Sharon Herbert for inviting me to give this talk. I would also like to respectfully greet all the viewers who have been kind enough to listen to me here or live. I will try to present to you the latest findings and information we have collected in Kültepe over the last 10 years. Of course, I cannot give you all the information in this talk, which is limited in time. I just want to highlight a certain period here, as you can see from the title. At the beginning of my speech, I think it would be useful to give you some brief information about the location and excavation history of Kültepe, but I am going to make it very short. Kültepe is located in the middle of the Anatolian Peninsula, just north of the Taurus Mountains and south of Kızılırmak, the longest river in Turkey. It is also located in a very fertile plain formed north of the city of Kayseri at the foot of Erciyes Mountain, the highest mountain in Central Anatolia, with an altitude of 4,000 meters. The Taurus Mountains, which separate Central Anatolia from its neighbors to the south, were an important factor in the formation of the culture of this region, including Kayseri and Kültepe. Although it was a little bit dangerous to cross these mountain ranges, the narrow valleys also provided controlled passages for south-north routes. In order to show that the Taurus Mountains can be crossed in spite of everything, I would like to point out these two settlements very briefly. One of them is Frakten, south of Mount Erciyes, and the other is Güvercin Kayası, west of Erciyes. It is worth emphasizing that the two Ubaid painted churches found in Frakten in 1947 before the Kültepe excavations, and as well as the numerous Ubaid-style seals and seal impressions recently discovered in Güvercin Kaya, show that these mountain ranges could be crossed even at that time, and that interaction from long distance had begun. It would be surprising if Kültepe, the largest center of the region north of the Taurus Mountains, was left out of this interaction. Although it was a coincidental find, an Ubaid stamp seal, which proves that Kültepe was involved in this interaction, was found outside the layer it belonged to during an excavation in 2023. As very clear, all you know that Kültepe lies at the eastern end of the plain at Kayseri, or called as Samsat Basin, and is 21 kilometers northeast of Kayseri. Now, I would like to briefly remind you of the story of the discovery of the city. Kültepe is known in archaeological and philological literature since the late 19th century. Two cuneiform tablets and decorated pottery from collectors in Istanbul reached the Louvre and British museums. These tablets, which were purchased from the Cappadocia region, were first published in 1871 by Pinch of the British Museum. When Pinch published these tablets, he referred to them as Cappadocian tablets because of the region where they came from. The characteristics of these two tablets were different in terms of grammar and writing compared to those found in Mesopotamia up to that time. The analysis of the tablets, therefore presented some difficulties. As analysis of similar tablets began to be published in Europe, it was realized that they were all from the same region associated with the center called Kanesh. Later, scientists and travelers came to Cappadocia to investigate where these tablets came from, and some reached Kayseri and Kültepe and started excavations to find there those tablets. But unfortunately, they all failed. Finally, in 1925, Bedřich Hrozny applied to the Young Republic of Turkey for an excavation permit at Kültepe. Hrozny, who is famous for analyzing the Hittite language for the first time in the world and determining its Indo-European character, started the excavations in the mound like his predecessors. He could not find any tablet in the mound excavations he carried out using a large labor force. In frustration, he decided to close the excavation, but upon a tip-off from his coachman, he learned that the tablets were not found on the mound, but in the fields at its foot. With his excavations on the hill, he produced a crater-like trench at the center of Kültepe Mound, and one of the most important monumental structures, the Varshama Palace, was destroyed. After the information he got, he immediately started digging in one of the fields surrounding the mound. This time, the information he received was correct, and he obtained a collection of about 1,000 tablets, both during the excavation and from the villagers as well. Hrozny's excavations proved that the Cappadocian tablets and painted pottery were from Kültepe in origin, and that the Kanesh city mentioned in these tablets was Kültepe. After Hrozny, no excavations were carried out in Kültepe until 1948. During this time, the organic soil from the mound was removed by villagers and used as fertilizer in their fields, and consequently, the mound and archaeological remains were greatly damaged. Quite a number of tablets have been scattered throughout the world's various collections through illegal antique trade during this time. Finally, in 1948, a long time, 23 years after Hrozny's excavations in 1925, a Turkish team directed by Tahsin Özgüç initiated the first round of systematic archaeological excavations there. These excavations, and ones in later years by Kutlu Emre, both were my professors, enlightened not only the history of Anatolia, but at the same time the history of the whole ancient Near East. Kültepe consists of a 21 meter high and 550 meter wide mound, almost circular in shape, and includes a lower city settlement known as the Kaman-Kalehöyük, which is at least 2.5 kilometers in diameter, although it's not yet fully defined. The mound shows a long cultural sequence of at least 19 building levels from the late Chalcolithic until the late Roman period, whereas the lower city contains only 4 well-defined levels. The lower city was settled for the first time in the beginning of the 2nd millennium BC and was abandoned right after the Assyrian Trade Colony Period. The Assyrian merchants lived in the lower town side by side with the local people in a district which was called as Karun. In this aerial photograph, you can see the areas excavated in Kültepe from 1948 to the present day, that is 76 years. And considering that it is a multi-layered settlement and that only the upper layers have been excavated in most places, it will be understood that the excavated areas are not more than 5% of whole Kültepe. The drawings and diagrams I placed here for comparison with the homeland of Assyrian traders and the famous classical city were to show how large the total area of Kültepe is and why it needs to be explored for another 1,000 of years. By the way, I should mention that in a cadastral plan we prepared this year, the first degree archaeological site that absolutely needs to be protected is 284 hectares. During the excavations by Tahsin Özgüç for almost 58 years, uncovered the monumental palaces and temples where the colony system was ruled, as well as the tablets containing royal letters and the list of palace officials that Rosne and the others could not find at the mound. So here you can see a map showing some of the, just maybe 10% of the private archives and the names of these householders discovered in the excavations carried out in the lower city or Karun to date. The ancient Assyrian merchant archives, consisting of approximately 23,000 tablets found at Kültepe, constitute a unique textual corpus in world history. Approximately 4,000 years ago, a community of approximately again 900 merchants and their families from the city-state of Assyria in modern-day Iraq settled in the city of Kanesh in central Anatolia. Over 70 seasons of archaeological excavations at this site have revealed the remarkable remains of a densely populated urban center that was destroyed in a great fire, including the houses of the Assyrian merchants' colony. In addition to the extremely well-preserved physical remains of the Assyrian merchant houses and their local Anatolian neighbors at Kültepe, the archives allow us to write a dense social and commercial history that is comparable to anything else known from the ancient world. The archives of the Assyrian merchants at Kültepe stand out as completely unique in ancient history. As I told you before, almost more than 23,000 cuneiform tablets and inscribed documents unearthed in the merchants' houses located in the lower city, and fewer, about 100 of them were in the mound proper, revealed the social, political, and economic life of especially the 19th and 18th centuries BC in central Anatolia and upper Mesopotamia. These private archives, written in Old Assyrian dialect, give an exceptional insight into a sophisticated market economy representing one of the best documented historical cases of ancient trade in the world. Thus, in 2015, Kültepe tablets or Old Assyrian archives have been enlisted in the World Heritage List by UNESCO among the other 5 collections in Turkey. The new Kültepe-Kanesh excavation project after Özgüç was initiated by myself in 2006 with a new excavation strategy and research questions. The aim of the excavations carried out in recent years has been to understand the political, cultural, and economic situation of Anatolia and of Kültepe in particular in the periods before the arrival of the Assyrian merchants and the patterns of how and why this very complex system developed. In this context, recent work at the site has reached to the earlier periods before the Karun age, to the late Chalcolithic age levels, proving a clear sequential development of cultural and architectural traditions. Previously, it was believed that the early Bronze Age settlement at Kültepe concentrated only in the core center of the mound, since no studies has been conducted on other parts of the site. Since there were monumental buildings in the West Trench still standing, it was not possible to descend to the early Bronze Age without removing them. For this reason, we chose an area where we could go to the older strata, where the settlement was not as dense and where more modern structures had been built. We planned to go down to the early stage of the early Bronze Age and even earlier periods which Tahsin Özgüç could not dig for various reasons. In 2015, we started a new project in the North Trench with my Japanese colleague, Professor Kontane. In 2016, we also worked at another destroyed area next to this North Trench located at far north end of the mound, marked in red in the slides. Sorry, the colors or the points are very small because of the size of the mound. There at the northern edge of the mound also traced the remains of early Bronze Age settlement. Again, in 2019, we also opened another trench where it was destroyed by the villagers in the previous years at the far west end of the mound, marked in red in the slide. According to the initial results, the early Bronze Age settlement extended to the western end of the mound, which was a surprise for us at the beginning. The occupation of such a large area before the colony period is important to show the size and how advanced the settlement was in the early Bronze Age. We don't know any other contemporary early Bronze Age settlement in Anatolia larger than Kültepe at present. Not only the operations in the north and west trench, but also the studies carried out in the southeast corner of the Varshama Palace, dating to the second millennium BC, in the center of the mound, started to yield promising results regarding the earlier settlements in Kültepe. Not only the So the excavations in that part revealed almost late Chalcolithic period, dating back to the 35th century BC at Kültepe for the first time ever. This is something actually doesn't relate it with my talk, but I just want to simply show what we did there. Excavations by Tahsin Özgüç, he dated layers 17 to 14 to the early Bronze Age too, and unfortunately the excavation area was so little and architecture remains in this level could only be investigated in a very small area below the monumental early Bronze Age 3 buildings. The small finds give us important clues, such as the relations of Kültepe in the earlier periods. First, the headless alabaster idols from level 15 indicates the earliest parallels were with southwestern Anatolia. On the other hand, other finds represent the earliest material traces of the relations with the southern Anatolia and northern Syria, as evidenced by, among others, imported Syrian bottles. Another study on the early Bronze Age II period was conducted in the southeastern corner of the Varshama Palace, which was saved from destruction during Grozny's expedition in 1925. These were contemporary layers with the early Bronze Age II layers on the western side of the mound as well. The elevated area within the outer eastern wall of the Varshama Palace was excavated and offered important contributions to understanding the architecture of the period. The presence of a large building was identified, similar to those known from contemporary centers in southwest and central Anatolia. That is, a complex of buildings within an architectural plan developed according to the topography of the mound. The building layout is reminiscent of the radial plan or the Anatolian style settlement plan of Badem, Acemhöyük, and Troy and the others in that area. The Kültepe compound had a secure gateway with door sockets and a slab-paved rampart. It may indicate that it had once been a private area at the top of the mound for the local ruling class. As an independent structure within the settlement, it doesn't fully protect the whole settlement as seen in Bademağaçı or Demircihöyük in the west, but covers a special area within the settlement, separating itself from the common district. As all you know, during the final phase of Early Bronze Age II, around the 25th century BC, new and different developments in both settlement plan and daily life emerged in Anatolia. These developments must have been accelerated by the arrival of neighbors from the south who wanted to benefit from Anatolia's natural resources as previously presented by Özgüç, Bayramovic, Şahoğlu, and Efe. Significant developments took place during the transition into the third and last phase of the Early Bronze Age. Important differences from the previous period are observed both with daily utensils and in settlement planning. A more prosperous lifestyle is generally evident in settlements of this period, alongside the introduction of certain previously unknown elements. A main reason for this acceleration of prosperity must have been the link formed by the southern neighbors for the purpose of exchanging the mineral resources of Anatolia. Metal ore mining in the Taurus Mountains, beginning as early as the Early Bronze Age II, may have been one of the main catalysts for the expansion of trade networks in the Early Bronze Age III period. This led to a local development of new mining techniques and resulted in sharing raw material resources and products in a well-developed and systematic commercial network. The first of the objects or materials that will best demonstrate the relations established with distant regions are seals. Apart from the 4-cylinder seals that were acquired by the Kayseri Museum through purchase, a seal published by Kemal Balkan and dated to the Third Ur period, and a seal published by Nimet Özgüç and dated to the third layer of Karun, which means before the Karun period, and no other seals or seal impressions dating back to pre-Karun period were known in Kültepe until that time. Cylinder seals, especially from the Akkadian period, along with those found in recent years, provide important clues about the relationships established with these distant cultures. In the late 1980s, Yener and her colleagues undertook an archaeometallurgical survey in the regions of Central Taurus Mountains, where they discovered early Bronze Age Kestel mines, which contained low-grade tin ores. According to the excavator, miners lived and processed the ore at an early Bronze Age settlement known as Göltepe, which was located 2 kilometers away from Kestel. Although the announcement of an early Bronze Age tin mine in Anatolia has caused debate that mainly revolved around whether ancient miners would consider such low-grade tin worth mining, some scholars have also suggested that other ores, such as gold and iron, might have been mined there. They just rejected the point that the tin was not there. But one must also keep in mind that another site near Kanesh, near Kültepe, at the flanks of Mount Erciyes, called Senir Sırtı, also has tin ores, and the late Chalcolithic and early Bronze Age 2 or 3 site at the top of the ridge. As at Kestel, the ores are complex, but to the evidence of tin ores mined during the early Bronze Age. As at Göltepe, the preliminary survey at the Senir did not generate evidence of a Middle Bronze Age settlement. As a result of these relations in the last phase of the early Bronze Age, we also find new concepts emerging in architecture and deep changes in the plans of the buildings. Following the more simple plan units and relatively modest buildings of early Bronze Age 1 and 2, the monumental structures that emerge during the third and last stage of the period hint at social change in Central Anatolia more broadly. The plan of these buildings suggests that the source of inspiration for the monumental buildings constructed at Kültepe at the beginning of the second millennium BC was based on the political, economic, and cultural developments both locally within Anatolia during the early Bronze Age, as well as a result of international relations at that earlier period. At Kültepe, 3 consecutive monumental buildings have been excavated in the west trench of the mound, built on top of each other, and each destroyed in a violent fire. These buildings all represent the third phase of early Bronze Age. The earliest monumental structure belongs to stratum 13, according to the excavations undertaken between 2000 up to 2023. This was a huge complex measuring 70 meters east-west by 55 meters north-south. The complex is composed of at least 2 distinct structures, but I'm not going to go into detail about them. Judging from the part excavated so far, the building was developed in at least 3 phases. The building shows that it was built according to a preset plan, but the dimensions and the angles of the rooms in the row differs and gets out of the draft. Rooms measure at the east end about 5.5 by 7 meters, while 6 by 8 meters at the west end. Up to 2015 season, we uncovered 5 small rectangular rooms without any doorways at the north and 7 large rooms in the south, at the south part of the building. Southern rooms have 1 doors at the south, opening to an ante-shaped spaces with benches which are marked with letter A here. This building complex, especially its dimensions, show that it clearly was not meant for domestic habitation. There are few clues about its function, since its contents were removed prior to the fire that destroyed them. Its large dimensions have no parallels in Anatolia up to now, and it was certainly an administrative building or its annex of storage units there. This building complex, especially its dimensions, of course, very clearly shown here that it's not for habitation. Of course, unfortunately, it was already abandoned, just we had to have some just architectural plan of this complex. Radiocarbon samples taken from the wooden beams belonging to the second phase of the building dated to the 25th century BC. That is the period when Anatolia began to have closer relations with its southern neighbors. Even being able to erect such monumental structure evidence the presence of a powerful local authority having close commercial ties with her neighbors. This building was built in the 25th century BC and must have been destroyed by the beginning of the 23rd century BC. Above the level 13 complex, 2 later monumental buildings had come to light during the excavations by Tahsin Özgüç, shown in red and beige in slide, brown here in the slide. The earlier of these was a monumental building, and he named as the Megaron, dated to level 12. Its size is not smaller than its parallels in Troy or in Bece Sultan. Regrettably, as Tahsin Özgüç noted, the plan of the building was not entirely clear, and its western part had been destroyed by the same large silo pit and the refuse pit that reach down to the earlier periods. The excavated part of the building is measured just 20 by 22 meters, and judging from what is preserved, there were white sitting benches shown here, white sitting benches located in front of the walls of either side of the entrance of the building. The entranceway between the benches led to a great hall with a large fireplace at its center. The 4 pillars surrounding the hearth supported the roof of this spacious room. Smaller chambers surrounded the hall. This building, which is named as Megaron, was previously considered as a single building. However, new excavations have shown that this previously excavated structure is only part of a larger complex. Probably, the part excavated at that time, as Tahsin Özgüç said, was the religious part of this complex. But the narrow rectangular rooms seen towards the west point to another function of this complex that we do not know exactly at present. On the one hand, it would be more eligible to think that it is a religious and official structure, but still waiting to be excavated. After the destruction of this so-called Megaron building, another monumental structure was built on top of it. Due to the pilasters and bands on the walls, it was named as Building with Pilasters by Tahsin Özgüç. In 2015, we excavated in the southwestern corner of this structure. Possibly an open-air kitchen appeared immediately above some of the walls that are contemporary with the building so-called Megaron, belonging to level 12. Still, the location of the fireplaces are quite evident in the preserved parts. The northern and western outer walls are discernible, unfortunately, but 8 horseshoe-shaped fireplaces were identified in the excavated area. Pieces of wood that were pushed inside the fireplaces have survived to this day. This kitchen with several fireplaces was contemporaneous with the monumental pilastered building of level 11B and was most probably a service unit for it. The plan of this open-air kitchen can be compared with the Ebla G Palace, which is not very clear here for this, sorry for the slide. And we continued digging in this area next to the kitchen utilities into 2007. Fortunately, the whole area was destroyed by a very strong fire. During the excavations conducted in 2018 and 2020, more than 100 gypsum idols and goddess statues were unearthed in a 5 by 5 meter square room in one of these monumental buildings. Since the room was heavily burned and destroyed, the conditions of the idols were not very promising. Burnt wooden beams and mud bricks had fallen down from the ceiling and walls, and the fire turned the gypsum idols and figurines into chalk and destroyed the pottery, including a set of carnoi in the room and vases with the idols stored in them. In spite of this terrible condition, we were able to reveal more than 100 gypsum idols. Disc-shaped idols with relief carvings on the body, which we know from the previous excavations, and the figurines sitting on the throne, which we know from other examples in the Kültepe, were also found in large numbers in this room and the room next to that room. I want to show you these 2 weird idols published in the early 20th century. When these 2 idols from private collections in USA were first introduced to the scientific world, the representations on them were thought to be imaginary and imitations, because these scenes were too much developed for the early Bronze Age Anatolian societies, and any similar scene had not yet been found in Anatolia until that time. The first has a representation something taken from daily life. A woman, maybe a queen, traveling on a horse is depicted with her servant. The second one is much more weirder than the other one. In the second one, 3 idol figurines are depicted as if on the podiums. Such a narrative scene was not yet known from Anatolia until then, or even in ancient Near East. There were 6 disc-shaped idols up to 40 centimeters in diameter found in this idol room. They fell on top of each other like domino stones. Probably here, perhaps on the bottom shelf, heavy, oversized idols were stored. Smaller ones were also lined up on the upper shelves. A similar scene is carved on one of the large idols found in this idol room in 2020. The depictions fortunately provided important information about hitherto unknown religious rituals of the early Bronze Age III period. Here, a kind of orchestra of musicians is depicted on animals, seems to be the bulls walking in a row. You don't see here very much, but maybe just a pencil drawing. A group of 6 people with double flutes or panpipes sitting on their thrones over a bull procession is unique in Anatolia, and we don't have any trace of anything similar to that at present. Thus, here I put made a fiction, but I am sure that this is not the only one at Kültepe. Here, I believe the one on the one of the idols which Özgüç found had the same scene, which you see some part of it. It was broken, unfortunately, not in one piece. As it is understood, music also had an important place in religious ceremonies in Anatolia. In fact, polyphonic music with an orchestra was probably also a way to more easily influence society. But unfortunately, most of these figures were erased too. One of the most important finds discovered in the idol room during the 2021 excavations was a statue, I call it statue, of a goddess sitting on her throne. However, this statue was also affected by the intense destruction. Unfortunately, its head was severed, decapitated from its neck. Its body was affected by fire and partially turned into chalk. Compared to the other figurines found so far in and around Kültepe, this headless statue is 45 centimeters in height, is no longer a figurine, but the tall statue of this age. These 3 figurines were found together with small other artifacts of ritual significance in a self-planned structure near that building. This figurine of a woman in this group is about 20 centimeters high. There are many figurines like this in Kültepe, but this one was found intact, and what it does is more or less clear. She is playing a flute or a lyre. We will have to look a little bit further west for the closest similarities to this figurine and the other alabaster figurines and idols found in Kültepe. For example, this one, I think that musicians from the West could also be included in the orchestra that I mentioned above. In this room, idols and figurines take the first place as the most concentrated group of finds. In addition to these, relatively few ceramics were found. In the southwest corner of the room, at the corner where the south and west walls meet, there is a 50 centimeters wide corner bench. The vases placed on this bench represent a ware group that was not known in Kültepe before this building was excavated. In fact, we have seen similar types of ceramics which we can roughly describe as gritty ware at the Kültepe Inler Mountain Cemetery before. This ceramic, whose paste is highly stone and limestone tempered, was fired at high temperatures and is very durable. Since it was fired at high temperatures, the limestones in the paste are easily recognizable. And among them, an important group of finds among the pottery is the carnoe or ring-shaped vessels. No surface treatment has been done on this plain simple ware ceramic with well-sifted and few sand-tempered paste. Due to the weight of the ceiling falling over them, almost none of them have survived to the present day in one piece. According to the fragments collected, at least 4 carnoe were placed in this room. A replica here, produced for an exhibition, is seen on the right-hand side. Similar carnoe found in the idol room have been known in the Near East since the late Chalcolithic period, especially in the Levant region. It is possible to find similar carnoe produced in the same style, although not in the same form. Unfortunately, the closest one to the Kültepe example is known from Byblos, and unfortunately, it is represented only as a fragment. But another surprise carnos comes from Cyclades Islands in the Aegean. I don't know if it shows a direct relationship or not, but when compared with other findings, it is clear that such coincidences cannot really exist together at the same period. Another interesting type of carnos again comes from Troy. A similar carnos consisting of 3 beakers connected to a horizontal round pipe was found by the villagers in Kültepe and given to the Kayseri Museum. In this respect, with 2 different types of carnos, Kültepe establishes ties with both Western Anatolia and Syria as well. But on the other hand, I should turn back to the idols. We know that one of the uses of idols and statues is certainly related to burial customs. Both at Kültepe Mound and at the Kültepe in Nerdağ Cemetery, we saw that most of the dead were buried with both idols and statues. We identified burials in Pitos graves in the cemetery, approximately 2 kilometers south of Kültepe. We have excavated so far 67 jar graves since 2014. These graves are contemporary with the 12th layer of Kültepe. Although single-headed idols are numerous, 2 and 3-headed idols are also common examples. Even ones with 4 or 5 heads or necks are known. It has always been accepted that the multi-headed idols represent a couple, a family, a husband and a wife. And as the numbers of the necks and heads increases, the number of family members increases. However, it should not be forgotten that a single male figure has not been depicted in Kültepe idols until now. Moreover, it is already a contradiction to consider the idols made in reliefs or on the bodies of idols as infants, such as those 2. Regardless, all Kültepe idols are female and are compatible with the concept of the femininity or mother goddess. In general, Kültepe idols and figurines are considered to have been produced from alabaster or gypsum commonly found in the region. However, there are few examples of these idols or figurines made of other materials. The first surprise came from Zile, near Maşatürk, north of Kültepe. A lead disc-shaped idol was purchased by the Istanbul Archaeological Museum. It was met with skepticism when it was first published. However, according to the information given by a lead idol purchased by the Kayseri Museum in 2021 and the seller of the idol, it is understood that the Zile example is real. The seller states that the 3-headed lead idol came from near Kültepe. These 2 examples show once again that the common origin of lead figurine production in Kültepe during the colony period is the early Bronze Age. And finally, in the excavations which we carried out in Kültepe in 2023, we found an idol mold. This is important in terms of showing that such idols were produced in Kültepe. So almost for the conclusion, according to the very recent C14 analysis, the idols and the building where these idols have been discovered can be dated to the 24th, 23rd century BC, which makes the findings contemporary with the Akkadian period. The C14 date obtained from the burnt branch fragments taken from here also gives the last date of the monumental buildings in Kültepe. All of these monumental buildings, which have been dated to at least 3 building levels, have been destroyed by fire. We have not yet completed the excavation of these structures yet. This structure, which includes idols, figurines, sculptures, and cairns, is dated to the level 11B, which is the last layer of the early Bronze Age Kültepe and is the last of the monumental early Bronze Age structures in Kültepe. After it was destroyed by a severe fire, no other structure of this character was built on it. When we look more closely, we see weaker, modest, and more irregular structures in the area south of the idol room and over the idol room that we have been excavating since 2020, which has a very different character from these monumental structures in terms of plan and material. After the destruction of this monumental building dated to the layer 11B, new and smaller but simpler structures were built in its place in phase 3, here is in orange, and phase 2 green of layer 11A. It is seen that these houses, all of which have a stone-paved common area and at least one hearth and oven, were built adjacent to each other. The studies carried out here have helped us to understand the stratification and change in architecture immediately after the destruction of the early Bronze Age monumental structures in Kültepe and in the time period before the Karm Age. On this slide, you can trace the simpler and weaker architectural phases built on top of the monumental building of 11B. So, as a summary and conclusion, the topics I need to highlight here are as follows. After these, in Kültepe, there is a great change in architecture and ceramics around 2200 BC. After these monumental structures, the last of which was destroyed around 2200 BC, no more monumental structures were built in Kültepe until around 2000 BC. In our studies in other parts of Kültepe and in the studies conducted before us during the Özgüç period, no monumental structure dated between 2200 to 2000 BC was encountered. In the studies we have carried out in other parts of Kültepe and trying to find similar buildings, similar monumental buildings was just failed. In Kültepe, there is a great change in pottery as well nearby the architecture. The pottery found in the layers till the end of the age of monumental structures are completely early Bronze Age in character. Afterwards, a change begins in the ceramic horizon, and the number of forms and the quality of the pottery decrease. The number of ceramics made on with the wheel has decreased, and handmade, rough, and thick-walled ceramics have become widespread. They show neither the features of the early Bronze Age nor Middle Bronze Age. In the entire Anatolian archaeological record by means of pottery, Alishar treeware is always stereotyped as early Bronze Age pottery. However, during the excavations carried out in the early Bronze Age layers up to the age of monumental structures, layers in Kültepe, we have never come across Aluşar III ceramics in situ. Aluşar III ceramics begin to appear in the layers called the early Kaghan or transitional period above the monumental buildings, and nothing to do with the early Bronze Age. And as a result, we have questions and questions. Around 2200 BC, the early Bronze Age kingdom in Kültepe was destroyed. No question on that. However, no traces of war were found, but there is very serious destruction. The structures were destroyed down to their foundations, and new buildings were built in a short time, but they were all small and modest. I think it will be necessary to take into account the settlement pattern in this large Kanesh city while investigating the cause of this destruction. We conducted some drilling test sondages, excavations in the mound this year to see if any monumental buildings were rebuilt in another area of Kültepe or in Kültepe after the early Bronze Age monumental buildings were destroyed. But so far, we have not found any trace of this anywhere. After the destruction of early Bronze Age monumental buildings, approximately 100 to 150 years later, the southern palace and the early palace of the Kaghan period were built around 2050 or 2030 BC. In other words, it is understood that there was no central authority that could build monumental structures in Kültepe until this time. This period is represented by layers 11A to 9 in Tepe. Archaeologically, it seems difficult to find the cause of this destruction for now. Therefore, we will need to work on things that are not visible to the naked eyes. I think that the various organic remains we found in our studies with Harvey in Kültepe this year will help us in this regard. No one can deny that there was a major drought in southern Anatolia or northern Syria at the 4.2 K. However, we do not yet know how effective this phenomenon was at the regions north of the Taurus Mountains, which was almost far away. And we do not yet know whether it is possible to attribute the reason for this change to the 4.2 phenomenon. Since there's not much research on the age of monumental buildings at Kültepe and the subsequent period that followed it, we do not know what it is like in Anatolia in general. The studies and research that will continue in Kültepe, I believe, will answer this question. I hope that the answers will be found regarding the end of early Bronze Age kingdom in Kültepe and throughout Anatolia. I would like to thank you very much for listening to me patiently and for your attention. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. That was just fantastic, all new stuff. I know it's always hard to start the question period. Here's someone who teaches introduction to archaeology. I'm a classicist, okay? What about, I couldn't help thinking of Troy, looking at your pottery and Troy too, and all of that. What's, for the almost interested amateur, is there a connection?
I mean, of course, speaking about pottery, and as I introduced some of the Western relations of Kültepe, one can immediately think about that pottery style came from the Western Anatolia or even from the Cyclades. And in one way it is true, because the things that I showed you, the idols and some of the Kernoi pottery is reminding that. But I know that, what I'm sure I can say that we have more depots than Troy at Kültepe, hundreds and hundreds of them. And then, of course, the idea or the kind of workmanship, not workmanship, but the concept should have been taken from the West. And the idols as well reminds the same thing, but still we need to have more evidences to say that they're coming from there. And we also need some more excavations in the Western Anatolia to show that the origin of those pottery actually originated there. But the thing that actually among the archaeologists, we all have the same difficulties. We have artificial naming. We don't have absolute dates for any object. When we say that, for example, the first pottery produced by wheel was introduced at Troy. Generally, this is accepted. The whole, in Anatolian archaeology, the first wheel-made pottery was produced at Troy, and level 2. But no one can give me the exact absolute date for level 2. I have more earlier produced wheel-made pottery at Kültepe. But we call the same age, early Bronze Age. And also in Troy, early Bronze Age. No, it's not that. Sorry.
I'm sure there are many questions from people much more knowledgeable than I about this period in Anatolia. So please, come forward.
Thanks. Someone over there.
Okay.
Microphone.
Do we have a microphone going around?
Hi, thank you very much. This is a very interesting discussion. So this is probably because of my lack of familiarity with Kültepe in terms of the archaeology, but do you see any sort of connection between these idols that you found in Kültepe and the Tel Brak eye idols in terms of how abstract they are in representing human form with huge eyes?
Actually, yeah, thank you very much for the question. Actually, we're all facing the same problems. And of course, at first, I thought that the idols found at Kültepe, I just compared them with the ones found at Tel Asmar at first, because there was almost more than 100 idols and figurines and statues found in Tel Asmar. And the date is almost a little bit earlier, early dynastic and earlier. But the thing that the concept was a little bit different than those. They were all votives or dedicated to the temple, given to the temple. But the ones that we find are all, mainly those ones were stored in this building. This is a different concept, not for a ritual event, not for ritual occasion. They were just deposited there. And not only in one room, but also we have another room still excavating this year, and there are many more others. And I believe that it was not a kind of cella, a ritual room. And so, actually by coincidence, I can say, especially with that one that I showed with the lyre or flute player woman or goddess, the ones at Cyclades is really similar to them, and even the size of them are almost the same. Of course, I don't say that someone came from Cyclades and or they produced them there, but still we need more archaeometrical studies to understand whether they were affected or someone affected from the Western concept or not. But of course, it's really difficult to find any evidence, solid evidence for that. Maybe we need more excavations. And those kind of idols were, Kültepe type of idols or figurines, were found only 3 other areas, sites. One neck was found in Acemhöyük, nearby the Salt Lake, and one in Hacı Bektaş, very close to Kültepe. And recently, 4 or 5 idols were found in Cappadocia. And the style is different, but almost the same concept. So it means that it is not very much popular in that part of the Anatolia. So it's a kind of very unique, and at the moment I can't say more than that, but still it's our question to find an answer. Sorry for that. Thank you indeed. It's dark, I don't see.
I think you may have stunned everybody.
Yeah, I believe they're waiting for the reception.
Yeah, no, it was just so much wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful, cool stuff. And so,
Thank you. Thank you.